This is Euronews Now. I'm Helena Humphrey. Here are your top stories. Ukraine's President Zelensky says the world narrowly avoided a radiation incident after a temporary blackout following a fire near its Zaporizhzhia power plant. As the war in Ukraine enters its 7th month, Russian President Vladimir Putin orders the army to enlist 137,000 new recruits. And French President Emmanuel Macron is in Algeria for a 3-day trip aimed at healing the wounds of colonialism and boosting European gas supplies.
A fire in the vicinity of Ukraine's Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station on Wednesday, which cut off electricity to it for hours. President Volodymyr Zelensky says it's only because the emergency backup generators kicked in that the plant was able to operate safely.
Today, for the first time in its history, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant stopped, and the emergency protection of its power units was activated after Russian shelling damaged the last operating line of its output to the Ukrainian power system. Diesel generators immediately started providing energy to the plant itself to support it after the shutdown. The world must understand what a threat this is. If the diesel generator had not been turned on, if the automation and our station staff had not worked after the blackout, we would be forced to overcome the consequences of a radiation emergency.
Russia has denied responsibility for the blackout, instead blaming Ukraine for the attack. UN nuclear watchdog the IAEA says it hopes a visit to the site could take place within days. It's been calling for the area to be demilitarized to prevent a potential catastrophic disaster at the plant. Russian President Vladimir Putin is recruiting. He's ordered the army to increase its size by 137,000 personnel. The decree was announced a day after Moscow's war in Ukraine hit its 6-month mark. Published on the Kremlin website, it didn't explain where the new recruits will come from or why he was ordering the increase. Meanwhile, Russia's State Duma Council has called on Western countries to stop supplying heavy weapons to Ukraine. It claims that Kyiv is using them to kill and maim people and create a risk of a nuclear threat. And a Russian court has ordered the release from custody of a former mayor of the country's 4th largest city. This pending an investigation and trial on the charges he's facing for criticizing Moscow's military operation in Ukraine.
I want to say that eventually everything will be fine. Dark times are not forever. You already know that, but I'll voice it again just in case. Thank you for your support.
Western countries estimate that between 70 and 80,000 Russian troops have been killed or wounded since it first invaded Ukraine.
It's hard to atone for over a century of colonialization. But healing the wounds of the past is top on the French president's list on his 3-day visit to Algeria. Emmanuel Macron laid a wreath at the monument to the martyrs of independence, martyrs who died fighting France. It has been 60 years since Algeria became independent, with recent months being marked by tensions between the two governments. Meeting his counterpart, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, in Algiers, Macron hopes to patch things up with its former colony, but economics plays a large part behind this trip too. Officially, the French leader's trip is oriented towards talking about young people and the future, but gas is the elephant in the room. Algeria has very large supplies of it, supplies which France and the rest of Europe is keen to have. And as the French government continues to heavily cap the price of energy at a huge cost to taxpayers, this need for gas is pressing.
Britain's regulator says household energy bills will rise by 80% a year in October, deepening the cost of living crisis. Ofgem says the average annual household bill is likely to be over £3,500. That's over €4,100. Consumer experts are among a growing number of people warning of a winter disaster unless the government steps in.
I've got one family upstairs, for example, that they have a prepayment meter. They always get into debt with it, and then they don't pay their rent because they have to pay the bills, because otherwise the gas and the electric gets cut off. But then they don't pay the rent because they've only got a certain amount of money. Then they get into trouble with Lambeth Council, their landlord. So yeah, I'm worried about them.
Some observers are warning the price cap could rise in the new year to over €7,000 annually, given the stagnation of the war in Ukraine, forcing millions into fuel poverty.
This is of a scale that we haven't seen for many decades, and therefore it really is of a scale that warrants big and creative national policy interventions in order to prevent what is a difficult year becoming essentially a catastrophe for many low-income families.
Both candidates vying to become the UK's next Prime Minister say they'll announce help for households if they're elected on September 5th, but neither has spelled out what form that help would take. The Spanish Parliament has approved the government's energy-saving rules as part of an EU-wide effort to reduce reliance on Russian gas. The measures, which were first applied on the 10th of August, affect everything, including shops, offices, cinemas and theatres.
Saving energy benefits everyone. It helps us to face Putin's energy blackmail. It's a saving for both domestic economies and the industrial sector. And it's a strategic action in the face of the challenge posed by climate change.
The German government is also introducing unprecedented measures to reduce gas consumption to avoid a crisis this winter. Starting from September, public buildings, apart from institutions like hospitals, are to be heated to a maximum of 19 degrees Celsius, and hot water will be switched off in such places. And while concrete proposals have not yet been laid out, Portugal is also planning on announcing energy-saving measures by the end of the month. It's asking businesses and industry to come up with ideas to help. The Croatian government, meanwhile, has tabled a bill lowering sales tax on the supply of wood chips, wood pellets and firewood to 5%, with a zero rate to be applied for solar panels.
The European Commission is continuing to scrutinise Hungary's latest proposals regarding the release of EU funds. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government last week pledged to change 10 laws in order to fight corruption, among other things, so it can receive European money. Brussels has requested it do so as part of its dispute over rule of law concerns in Hungary. In April, the European Commission activated its so-called rule of law mechanism, which means EU funds can be held back if there are perceived to be systemic risks. According to one Hungarian cabinet minister, the government's position is the same on all these important issues. The Commission did not confirm this, but a spokesperson highlighted the areas of concern.
These include the failure to prevent unlawful decisions by public authorities, or the failure to ensure the absence of conflict of interests, or the limitation of effective investigation and prosecution of cases involving union funds.
One member of the European Parliament has asked the European Commission for its correspondence on the matter with the Hungarian government, but the release of the documents has so far been refused. That MEP is now warning that Budapest's promises about reforms have never come to fruition in the past.
Orban has been smart in the past about making people believe that he is willing to reform, but in the meantime he already prepares the next attack or the next big heist to steal money. So the Commission needs to be extremely cautious not to be played by Viktor Orban.
Hungary is the only country that the European Commission has activated the rule of law mechanism against. And it's the only country which hasn't had its pandemic recovery plans approved by Brussels, meaning no EU funds can be released. Because of rising energy prices and a flailing currency, Hungary has a huge budget deficit. After the April elections, the government started an austerity programme and now hopes to find an agreement with Brussels to get the cash as soon as possible. Christopher Pitchers, Euronews, Brussels.